Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are going to get started. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of a backlog at the entrance with the security, so we'll have a few more friends joining us as we get started. Is an understatement. But we're so pleased that Senator Wyden is here, and we really want to honor your time, Senator. So we're gonna get started and invite the Senator up in just a minute. But I wanted to first welcome everyone. My name is PJ Andrews. I am the Director of the U.S. Baha'i Office of Public Affairs. We represent the American Baha'i community at the national level. We are so glad that you could join us this morning, and I hope everyone has had a chance to get their coffee and breakfast and get settled into the space. As you know, the theme of today is a letter that the American Baha'i community has written to the American population, to America, called A Common Endeavor, Realizing the Promise of America. And this is something that our office has been working on in anticipation of the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. And in this letter, we raise a lot of questions, and at the heart of it is a call for spiritual renewal in this country. A question of, with all of the challenges that we face, what is the role of our value structure and the morality that underpins us, and the spiritual qualities that really guide the way that we are as human beings and the way that we interact with each other, and how can that conversation permeate the halls of government, which is why we're so excited to be here in the U.S. Capitol building raising this question. And then what we thought, there's many ideas raised in this letter, which hopefully you all have on your seats. It looks like this. So we encourage you to in your own time, find a chance to read this letter and see how it might inspire your own work. But within this letter, there's many ideas and thoughts that we share, but for this conversation in this space, we thought we would raise the question of social trust. And so the theme of this conversation is social trust, hope, and the public good. There are many questions that face us as a society as we approach our semi-quincentennial, and I promise that is the only time I will say that word today. But this 250th anniversary adds to the depths of the questions that we can ask ourselves as a country. And this morning we want to explore this question of social trust as the basis for a democratic society, and ask what is the basis for trust and how can it be built. So we are very grateful to Senator Wyden from Oregon, who is co-hosting this program with us and has helped us reserve this beautiful room in the Capitol building. And he is a longtime friend and supporter of the Baha'i community. We are also very grateful to have Rainn Wilson as our moderator, who I will be introducing later, along with our wonderful panelists, Jasmine Miller-Kleinhans, Carissa Raskin, Pete Davis, and Michael Toscano. But first, I will introduce them in a moment, but I'll give the floor now to Senator Wyden, who will join us this morning. Senator?
Thank you so much, and it would be cruel and unusual punishment to give your friends a big speech. And I thought I'd take just a couple of minutes and talk particularly about the common endeavor, because the common endeavor is not exactly what's going on now in Washington, D.C. So the first thing I want you to do is give a big round of applause to a great Oregonian, Rainn Wilson. And the Baha'is are doing so much good work across the country that I want to compare it, and Rainn, I think, would identify with this, with what I call the Oregon way. The Oregon way is trying to build on exactly what you're talking about, which is a common endeavor and bringing people together. There are a lot of reasons why there's division in our society, and we could spend days here dissecting various social media and various other things that are polarizing forces. What I like so much about the common endeavor is you're saying, look, let's get people involved. As soon as I saw Rainn, I said, you've got your roots in Central Oregon. I'm going to get you up for something where he can talk to the whole state and talk about a common endeavor, a social kind of trust, exactly what I just heard about. And it's a big lift. I've had 1,167 town hall meetings in Oregon. Open to all, don't give a speech, just come on in, say what's on your mind. My wife said, dear, I think it's great that you're doing this. She said, some of those little towns, they have more cows than people. And somebody once at one of the meetings said, I don't think the cows are with him either. So getting across traditional divides is what you all are doing, and I think is so essential, and this is what political people really need to understand. And I had a couple of points that I wanted to make this morning. One is I think Baha'is have a real connection with my own kind of roots, which is Judaism. You know, my parents fled the Nazis in the 30s, not all got out. If you have time, stop by the Holocaust Museum. You'll see a picture of my dad and his unit in the Holocaust Museum. My dad was a very modest kind of man, much like Baha'is. And he wouldn't really, there's one of your fans right there, speaking out. But he told me, just remember, we can do a lot of great things in America when we work together, which is what the common trust is really all about. And there is something that we Jews feel strongly about. It's called tikkun olam. Has anybody ever heard that phrase? Yeah. It means perfect the world. It's exactly what Baha'is are doing in terms of this program and this common endeavor. Now, the government of Iran obviously is still pursuing a ruthless agenda against Baha'is. They're doing it this year, and the repression continues. So I want everybody to know that in these raids on Baha'is, I'm going to continue here in the Senate, on the floor of the Senate, and elsewhere to make sure that the truth gets out. Those detained are increasingly subject to torture, mock executions, electric shocks, solitary confinement, forced confessions, and that's according to the Center for Human Rights. So if anything, it probably is an understatement. The Iranian government's long history of harassment, dehumanization, and persecuting Baha'is is part of what the reality is there and what we have to do to get the word out. So the Wyden family knows a lot about authoritarianship. And I wrote a book last year. It's called Chutzpah, which is the Yiddish word for grit and determination and trying to do what's right. And it strikes me that Chutzpah and the faith of the Baha'i community very much stand in unity for a world that gives everybody a chance to get ahead. You know, I'm the tax writer here in the Senate. I'm on the committee that the point person for Democrats. And people ask me, what about this tax thing? I say, well, I want a tax code that gives everybody in America the chance to get ahead. And what I'm trying to do is something very similar to the common endeavor, Rainn, which is when I talk about the issues, I talk about how we're going to find common ground, how we're going to give everybody a chance to have a better life. And I just am so appreciative of the Baha'is and what you do, not just in the United States, but around the world. There are millions who follow the incredible model that you've applied to society. I love the chance to see you at the 250th anniversary. Godspeed, and I want you to know as long as I'm in public service, I'm going to be a Baha'i guy. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Senator Wyden, for sharing those thoughts with us and telling us about the Oregon Way and outing Rainn as an Oregonian. I don't know if that was public knowledge, but now we all know.
Don't forget he's ours.
Have a wonderful day. So I think that was a great foundation to kind of hear Senator Wyden's perspective on this question of the need for social trust. Again, foregrounding it in this spirit of service that imbues the spirit of the state of Oregon. And we're going to continue that conversation, and I'm going to just share a little bit about how the program will go, and then I'll turn it over to Rainn, who will get a conversation going with our panelists. So we have about 40 to 50 minutes for conversation, and we have a series of questions that we've been able to share with the panelists ahead of time to sort of really draw out their experiences and their insights to this question. We also, a part of this project, a part of a common endeavor, has always been conversation and engagement. So we do have a period after about 50 minutes of conversation with the panelists, a chance to ask all of you to explore some of the questions that this Common Endeavor statement is asking. And so if you turn over your program, you'll see on the very back there's a set of questions that we'll turn to towards the end, and whatever sort of moves you from those questions, we'll encourage you to turn to 2 or 3 people around you and start to have that conversation here. And then we'll call it a day after that. But we hope that it really will start to encourage and inspire your own reflection, and that you'll take these conversations out into the spaces that you inhabit and you find yourself in your own lives. So let me turn to this wonderful panel, which is really a dream team of friends of our office, people that I'm personally enamored with, and have had such a joy getting to know over the years, and I'm so glad that they all made time to come from near and far to be here today. So Rainn Wilson may not need a lot of introduction for those who are familiar with his acting career, and perhaps many of you are also familiar with his exploration in recent years of the idea that we need a spiritual revolution, and the effort he has put into making sure that that conversation is very inclusive of many perspectives through his podcast, Soul Boom. It's such a delight to have him join us this morning and moderate this panel. Welcome, Rainn. And then Pete Davis, next to Rainn, is a writer, filmmaker, speaker, and civic advocate whose work explores commitment, community, and democratic participation. He is the author of Dedicated, The Case for Commitment in an Age of Infinite Browsing, and co-creator of the documentary Join or Die, inspired by the work of social scientist Robert Putnam on civic connection, social capital, and community life. Pete's work focuses on strengthening civic life, meaningful relationships, and collective well-being. Welcome, Pete. And then to Rainn's right is Jasmine Miller-Kleinhens. Jasmine is an assistant professor at the University of Mississippi Medical Center, whose research explores how social and environmental factors shape cancer disparities through epigenetics. Jasmine also serves with the Baha'i community at the national level, supporting its community building and youth empowerment efforts, and as a member of the executive committee of the Association for Baha'i Studies in North America. Welcome, Jasmine. And then to Jasmine's left is Carissa Raskin, who is the CEO of Listen First Project, a backbone organization for the Bridging Divides movement. It supports a coalition of over 500 partner organizations dedicated to bring people together across difference to build trust, respect, belonging, and social cohesion in our communities and country. Carissa manages several collaborative initiatives on behalf of movement leaders and serves as a leading voice in the movement. Welcome, Carissa. And then finally, on the right of Pete is Michael Toscano, who is the director of the Family First Technology Initiative at the Institute for Family Studies and co-founder of the Faith Family Technology Network and a member of the Policy Council for the Alliance for a Better Future. His work aims to ensure that we as a society harness technology for social good, understood particularly through the lens of the well-being of families and young people. So welcome, Michael. Thank you all for being here, and I will now turn it over to Rainn.
Hello. Thanks, PJ. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much for coming to this conference room. It is true, I was a closeted Oregonian, and I've been outed now. My wife and I took our honeymoon there. She's from Oregon, and we spend big parts of every year at our home up in the mountains up there. I love it. So it was great to meet the senator and thank him after he's departed for his wonderful, wonderful comments. And, I just want to speak from the heart and say it's an honor to be here. As a member of the Baha'i faith, it's rare that we get to come in directly to the Capitol and speak about big ideas. And Michael, may I say this for a second? I really urge you all to check out this amazing document, A Common Endeavor. It should be there on your chairs. It's really beautifully said, talking about the past 250 years in America and maybe the future 250 years, and what a spiritual renewal of America based on its universal inherent values might look like. And it's beautifully presented, and I'm so happy to be supporting the release of this document and the conversation around the document. In the document, it talks a little bit about conversation, and I think sometimes conversation is poo-pooed, but it's actually an important action step. Having a conversation is an action, especially if it's done in a collaborative way and a consultative way. And I'm so excited for the conversation this morning and to learn from these amazing panelists who I've been getting to know their work. I'm just thrilled they're here. Thank you for coming. There's a free breakfast. Help yourselves.
Yes.
My first question is for Callum. What's it like being an infant in America today? He's occupied right now, so I just wanted to say a couple of remarks to get things going. One of the things that came up was the Declaration of Independence closes with these words, and the first time I heard this was yesterday, and it blew my mind how prescient and exciting the closing sentence of the Declaration of Independence is. It says, "And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. That hits hard and beautifully stated. Very exciting. Starting a country was not just about securing basic rights. It required mutual commitment and shared responsibility. It asked us to move past coexistence toward active, reciprocal well-being. It asked us to see every individual as a soul of inherent dignity. Freedom, equality, and social trust have to be built and sustained through mutual obligation, sacrifice, and common purpose. We have a range of perspectives on the authors of the Declaration, from admiration for their achievements to criticisms of their shortcomings. Nevertheless, the document was a catalyst for this project that is our democracy. And on this 250th anniversary, we can ask important questions. What are the mutual commitments that make it possible for us to function and progress as a society? How do we build the relationships that enable us to make and implement collective decisions for the common good? Even fair negotiation and compromise among competing interests require trust, inclusion, and goodwill. But what possibilities for collective flourishing open up to us if connection, mutual concern, and a commitment to shared aspirations can grow across perceived lines of division? Across the country, we see glimmerings of hope in efforts to bring people together in shared engagements, to build community, engage in meaningful conversation, and serve humanity. Our panelists this morning can share some of those experiences. Let's see what we can glean from them. So, wonderful panelists. Thanks for coming. I have a couple of broad questions, but specific in their ways that I thought would lead off the conversation. So I'm gonna throw it out kind of for everyone. If people want to speak to this question, be brave and jump right in. The first question is it possible to create policies and programs that build social trust and connection across differences? And how are you seeing this happening within and among families, neighborhoods, communities, institutions, and organizations? And what happens when social trust and connection increase? But going back to that first thing, is it also possible to create policies and programs that can build that social trust? So I'd love to hear from anyone who wants to jump in. Just press this little button.
I'll take a dive.
Michael.
Thank you, first of all, so much for hosting this panel, and thank you so much to the Baha'i community for having this inviting us to this conversation. I'm grateful and deeply honored. This is a beautiful document, and I'm excited for this conversation. My work mainly focuses on children and technology, and we've been working on this since about 2019, when a number of parents came to us and explicitly asked us to work on this issue. This was, for us, a bit of a surprise, but when we walked away from that conversation, we realized that if we were going to serve the family, we could not neglect to do what families were asking of us. So we've since been involved with the driving of a number of policies on the state level, dozens even, actually, laws that have been passed in states across the country, ranging from age verification for social media pornography, app store regulations, and other adjacent things. And what we have seen at numerous meetings where bills are being debated is the presence of parents who are there, and they are advocating on behalf of their children, and they're asking lawmakers to do something. And the lawmakers really desire to do something effective. And watching the bipartisan nature of this work unfold has been, for me, a revelation. And I think for the lawmakers themselves, it acts as a revelation, because when they get something serious done, even if today we might consider helping kids low-hanging fruit, but 5 years ago, this was a revolutionary idea. But when they work together and they get it done, they start to wonder, what else can they do together? And there's an example in Minnesota recently. They passed a social media age verification law, which would require parental consent for a minor, defined as 16 years old in this case, to open a social media account. And you should have seen the way that the lawmakers were just so excited to be working with their colleagues across the aisle, and were openly talking about the opportunity for doing more. So when they succeeded, they were like, oh, wow, if we can do this, what can't we do? And so I think that what I would suggest is that one thing that lawmakers and people that work on policy should do is they should look for the things where there's a lot of common ground and do whatever it takes to get it across. I know there's a lot standing in the way, and so it's not an easy task, but once that is accomplished, then there's a lot more that becomes available to them to do.
I love that. And it's called a common endeavor. So people getting together and finding a common endeavor to work on will snowball other common endeavors. That's great. And what's the name of your organization for those who don't have it?
Institute for Family Studies.
There you go. Great. Anyone else? Someone?
I'm happy to keep going, if but I don't want to hog the mic.
Carissa.
Thanks, Rainn. Can you guys hear me? Okay, all right. So yeah, I think it's a fantastic question, and honestly, there are so many examples of policies and programs where people really have come together to create opportunities for everyone to thrive. I think one of the challenges right now is those aren't the things that make it into the headlines, so we're not even as aware of all of the different ways that people are coming together, and it makes it harder to believe that it's possible. So to answer your question, is it possible? Yes, and I think one of the things that we need to do is where we see those programs and policies and initiatives coming forward, we need to lift them up. We need to help create the hope by showing other people that this can be the new norm. And I think it happens here, certainly, on Capitol Hill. I mean, there's an organization called Future Caucus. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but, entire generation of up-and-coming leaders in politics who have committed themselves so early on in their career to take a bipartisan approach to policymaking, to relearn, honestly, the ways of government to work together so that they can live out what that final statement of our Declaration is calling for them to do as public servants. And then at the community level, I mean, there are so many people. So my organization represents the Bridging Divides movement. How many of you, just by raise of hands before walking in today, have heard the term the Bridging Divides movement? Very few folks.
7.
So 7, there you go. Funny story, before I took my job as, I previously was the director of coalition engagement, and now I'm the CEO of our organization. When the application landed on my desk for someone suggesting I apply for a position in the Bridging Divides movement, I said, I didn't go to school to be a civil engineer, and I'm not an architect, so why am I building bridges? It's because it's not common vernacular. We don't think about bridge building on a social level, and yet so many of us are doing it in our communities every single day. We all want for better communities. We all want to see our neighbors thrive together. That's why we have so many organizations, Catholic charities, YMCAs, Habitat for Humanities. And so many people are investing in those programs, are giving of their time to bring people together around a common purpose. But we don't always equate that back to the ways in which we engage in democracy or in our shared America. And yet that is how we live out our lives in our communities. And so I think one of the biggest opportunities for us, whether we're sitting here on Capitol Hill or we're back in our communities just, going about our days, is to think about all of the ways that we have the opportunity to be bridge builders, and that would bring us closer to a common endeavor with our community, where politics doesn't necessarily need to be the thing that we are engaging around or avoiding. It's not the first thing that we're thinking about doing. We're thinking about being a neighbor. We're thinking about being a fellow community member, a fellow American. And then in the process of fulfilling that role, we find that we actually do have more in common, and the opportunities for working collaboratively toward policy change or larger scale programs kind of just organically comes out. And that's where the relationships and the trust is built, because you put in that effort to be part of your community first.
Thank you. Thanks, Carissa.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm Pete Davis. I'm the co-director of Join or Die, this film we've been touring for the last 3 years about community in America. And I mention that because kind of that, which is, when I think about this question, what I love about this question is it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes by this Brazilian philosopher named Roberto Unger. And here's the quote. I'm going to say it twice so you don't have to remember the first time. Our ideals are nailed to the cross of our institutions. Okay, our ideals are nailed to the cross of our institutions. And what does he mean by this mysterious phrase? What he means is that we can have all the ideals we want about our country or our community or our own lives, but they will just remain that way, just ideals in our head or heart, until we bake them into norms and practices and organizations and laws and things like that. And there's actually a give and take between the organizations that we inhabit and the ideals that we have. So our ideals inform what we build, and what we build and inhabit informs what we believe and who we are. It forms who we are. Another way people have said this is statecraft is soulcraft, which is the way that we organize our society is the way we start organizing our hearts, and vice versa. And so when I think about that, when I think about these ideals that we're talking about today, we're talking about coming together in community. We're talking about seeing each other for our inherent dignity, for connecting beyond our surface levels to the deeper foundation that we share, where we're all children of God. How do we start walking from those ideals to institutions? And so we start thinking about, well, what is the thing that teaches us those things? Books teach us things, panels like this teach us things, but what really gets that idea down in our bones is real encounter with real people, breaking through the callousness and insulation that prevent us from connecting with each other. Having mercy towards each other. The great Jesuit priest, James F. Keenan, says, mercy is the willingness to enter into the chaos of others. Mercy is the willingness to enter into the chaos of others. How do you have institutions that make us more merciful? Okay, so now let's get to the institution. What we've been touring the last 3 years talking about, and what we made this whole film about, Join or Die, is that the institution at the heart of our democracy is the club, the organization, the civic association, the union, the city, the religious congregation. Associational life is the foundation of our country. It's the place where you are drawn out of yourself and encounter other people. In special organizations that some people call bridging organizations that are designed to connect people across difference, those are the places and venues where you connect across difference. Here's the problem. Associational life over the last 75 years has been in steep decline. In the mid-20th century, across all demographic groups, it would have been very, very normal to be part of 2, 3, 4 organizations. It would have been very, very abnormal to be part of 0 organizations. Over the last 75 years, we've had a 50% decline in the amount of organizations, the amount of people who've gone to a meeting last year, the amount of meetings that have happened, the amount of people who take leadership roles in meetings. And in recent polling last year, 57% of Americans belong to 0 organizations. That includes congregations, unions, clubs, Rotary clubs, pickleball leagues, any of this stuff. And then another 10% say they belong to an organization but did not attend a meeting last year. So we're at 2/3 of Americans did not attend a single meeting where you meet in public life. And the results of that are that those ideals are not being formed in people. Those practices are not happening because the gym, the civic gym where we practice things, is those organizations. And so what we need to do is we got to turn that around, and we got to figure out how to reforest civic life in America. And I'll leave it at that. There's kind of details we can get into that I'm sure so many people on this panel and so many people in this room know about, have thoughts on how do we reforest civic life. But that is the heart of where this happens. It starts in beautiful documents. It starts in books. But it eventually needs to be baked into those practices. And the place where that's baked in is in the actual associations where we come together. And we're not coming together in right now.
Wow, that's powerful. Thanks, Pete. Jasmine.
Yes, I saved the best for last.
There we go.
Or not, we'll see.
Top that.
Can't. But I was just thinking, I mentioned to some of my friends here, it's a little disorienting because just yesterday, maybe less than 12 hours ago, I was on a doorstep with an 18-year-old, talking with him about how he builds community. And now I'm here with you all. But maybe that shouldn't be so disorienting because that's how our nation is. You can be at the doorstep with someone trying to help them think through their purpose in life and how they might build a better community. And you can also be at these larger stages and saying, well, actually, it is the individual, it's the community, it's the institutions that all have to work together. And one of the things, I think it's true, I think there's a lot of people who in their homes, they want to be involved. They just don't know how. And if you go to each home, they're like, I would love to have a community where I'm engaging, I'm having meetings, I'm talking with it. But they don't believe anyone else believes that, and they don't know how to do it. And so part of the work, at least in the Baha'i community, in trying to build community, is actually going out to people and having these conversations, not just at the doorstep, but then saying, okay, let's come together. You actually all believe this to be true, and you can come together within your community to talk with each other and read your own reality about what you can do. And that starts at the age of a child, even. A child can look with a small group of their own neighbors, say, okay, what is it that we want to do? How can we have pure and tender hearts that we channel towards the betterment of our community? And maybe that's planting a garden. Maybe that's making sure we play together more kindly. Maybe that's taking care of our younger siblings. For those who are maybe a little older, they're now thinking about what can they do? Okay, actually, our task is to raise that younger generation, provide programs for them, educational programs where not only do they strengthen their intellectual capacities, but also their moral structure, that they're able to not draw on hope as an ideal, but as a practice. And then those who are even older, adults who actually, their task is to channel the power and energy of the youth. Because the youth have so much potential, and yet it's almost like you have to channel it, or else it's diffused. And so community can do that. And then that can go further up to the society level, that can go up to the level of the institution. And even for the institutions to recognize that power and maybe reconceptualize their idea of leadership such that they are trying to understand what it is that the youth and the young people want so that they can channel that.
Beautifully said. And can I stay with you for a second? I love what you're talking about. And I know that a lot of the Baha'is at the grassroots are attempting to build what I would call like organic communities, like a community that wants to come out. They're not trying to foist a certain kind of community onto a group of people, but what does that group of people what makes their hearts sing, what brings them together, how can they be of service in their cul-de-sac or their neighborhood. When you were speaking to that 18-year-old, and so I think it's important to note, and it's mentioned a little bit in A Common Endeavor, that this act of bringing people together for common service is a spiritual act. That spirituality is not something that just stays in some kind of hall of worship. It's something that happens on the cul-de-sac or in the neighborhood. And the next question for the panel has to do with the erosion of social trust in America and how it's not just a civic or political problem, and I think, Pete, you referenced this, it has moral and spiritual dimensions and reverberations. So what have you learned? I'm going to start with you with the neighborhood work. What have you learned about engaging about the erosion of social trust and the moral and spiritual dimensions to that? And how can it include people with different worldviews? And how can we include people with different religious, spiritual, and secular perspectives?
Yes, that's a really good question. I think part of it, so I'm a biologist by training, a molecular biologist, and so I often think about the human body. And when you put things in a certain analogy for people, it's like regardless of whatever you are, we're all this one body, and we all have to contribute in some way. And you can't say, oh no, I'm over here, I'm the right hand, and I'm fine, and the left hand is over here suffering. And when you put it in that terms, people are like, oh yeah, I get it. I can't just imagine this better world, I have to contribute towards it, and I have to do it with others. The other thing, when you're talking about these like real social, spiritual or moral things, I also think of it in terms of maybe, like we know gravity exists. Yeah, it's like a true force. And once we knew gravity existed, we could fly. And similarly, when you have certain conversations with people and you say, love is a real thing. It's a true force. It's a spiritual force, but it can be drawn on. And if you draw on love, what can happen? And maybe it's an idea that's first planted, but when it's acted on, people see it. They say, oh, I was so scared. I saw the news. I'm afraid that my neighbors are going to do something terrible to me. But when I just took a leap of faith, I saw that love. I saw that actually we did want the same thing. We actually do care about each other. Okay, I'll come back. But it does take a little bit of like kind of painting a picture and also having them have that faith that there is this social trust, that there is this common good, and that wouldn't it be better? Wouldn't you be happier not being isolated? And they say, yeah, of course, I don't want to be isolated. So that's been my experience.
Beautiful, thanks. Anyone else? Again, the erosion of social trust is not only a civic or political problem, it has moral and spiritual dimensions. Thank you. What have you guys learned about engaging on the moral and spiritual dimensions and that having to do with the erosion of social trust? Anyone else? And I want to say, sorry, Pete, the word, I don't think for anyone at this table, but the word spiritual can kind of be off-putting because it has a lot of different definitions. But for now, we'll just define spiritual as kind of common, universal, shared values, the things that we know, love, and trust about other people, compassion and kindness and mutuality. So if you'd like to substitute that definition of spirituality, you can.
Wonderful. You know, as we've been touring the country and talking to people all around the country about their experiences with clubs, both the clubs that have changed their life and also the lack of clubs and the feeling of social isolation and things like that. And I'm defining club very capaciously. Any organization, including like a neighborhood potluck, all the way to very serious like climate change fighting organizations, to pickleball leagues, anything like that. And we've been talking with them about the ones that have changed their life and the ones that are growing in this time of a civic desert. Like, what are the civic trees that are really flourishing in a civic desert? And it's the ones that are willing to take seriously the depth of what they're doing with their club, even if it's about a very goofy thing. Like the bowling league that says, we're not just a bowling league, we are about something deeper than that. What we found is probably the single most biggest correlate with what makes a club thrive or a type of organization thrive is when it's willing to follow the true weirdness of humanity. Like, it's willing to go deeper and say, oh, one of our members came to us and said they wanted to make a specific animal that's going to be the animal of our club, and then they made t-shirts with everyone to have that animal. Or they wanted to have a motto of how they wanted to start the meetings, and then they start saying that motto. And what we found when we looked into the archive of the peak of American civic life, like mid-century, mid-20th century, which again had a lot of goofy civic life, garden clubs and pageants and bowling leagues, but a very serious civic life. The civil rights movement was run on civic organizations and meeting rooms. What they all had in common is they all saw themselves, they all had a double mission. They all had their stated mission, which is, we get together and plant a garden, or we get together to bowl, or we get together and fight for civil rights. But then they all had a foundational mission, which is we usually see a three-part thing here. One is we're doing something out there in the world, which is what everyone sees. We do external work. So that's what everyone sees on the name of our club. Like, we throw bowling leagues, we fight for civil rights. But then there's two other things they also do. Second is we are forming our own members to be the best selves that they can be. We are schools of citizenship. When you talk to civil rights veterans who were there in the fights in the 60s, they'll talk about racial injustice. But mostly what you'll find that they'll want to talk about is they'll want to talk about the practices of their organization, where we practice nonviolence, we sang these songs, we developed from children into adults by being part of this. We formed ourselves, and I've brought that spirit into all the work I do, even if I'm fighting for other causes or even raising my family or just participating in my community. So you're forming people internally, you're doing something externally, and you're forming community among each other. So, and those are the three things that drive us. We want to change the world, we want to become the best selves we are, and we all want to become, be in community with each other, and that's what the best organizations do. And I think that's a spiritual thing to fight for each of those. I'll say one quick last thing on this, which is there's also a spiritual question in terms of the lack of what people are feeling. Some people come up to us, they say, I don't even know where to start. How do I start doing community? I don't even have time for this. And we've discovered along the way, there's one question at the heart of all civic development, which is the word we use for the proliferation of community across this country. How do we civically develop our country? Here's the question at the heart of it all. What are you doing alone that you could be doing together? You can ask that at the individual level. What are you doing alone that you could be doing together? Are you cooking alone? Why don't you start cooking together? Are you raising your kids alone? Why don't you start going on walks together and play dates together? Are you grieving alone? We just had this horrible, horrible moment of national grief with COVID, and we never really grieved together. We didn't come together as a country to grieve that. Could we be grieving together? Are you fighting City Hall alone? Why don't you fight City Hall together? That's an effective political organizing. And then what you guys need to ask as leaders at the city level, state level, and national level is, are we trying to civically develop each of our cities and states alone? What can we do in Congress to do that together? What are the people who are succeeding in turning their cities around needing from above to help that? And Senator Chris Murphy's working on that. Like, do they need more funding? Do we need more economic policies that give people the space to do community? The fight, there's a law that was passed in the 30s. That is the reason we have the weekend. And the weekend is when a lot of civics happens. Maybe we should start opening ourselves up to questions about the work week and flexibility on that. So I just leave you with that spirit. That is a spiritual question. What are you doing alone that you could be doing together? It's not just practical.
Wonderful. Anyone else want to speak to that? And I want to say, too, you've brought up pickleball a couple of times. As an avid tennis player, there's a great disconnection between the tennis and pickleball communities, and I'm realizing that we need to bring these two entities together for a deeper conversation. Thank you. You've inspired me. Anyone else?
So I think I would answer this question around, being able to come together on a more spiritual level in three ways, and I'm going to name them because I haven't had a lot of sleep, Callan, and I want to make sure that I hit all of them. So institutions of higher education as a place, faith as a place, but I'm going to start with families because at least for, I think, most people, we develop our sense of self first within our family units. We are raised based on the morals that take place in our families. We experience it through our parents and what we're exposed to. And then somewhere along the way, we start to, develop our own ideas and sense of self. And sometimes that can create a rift. And I think there are opportunities for us and really a desperate need. If we want America to see themselves as more unified and have a sense of common purpose, we need to be able to do the hard, probably the hardest work of being able to turn back towards family members with whom we've become estranged because of our differences of opinions, because somewhere we questioned along the way, do our morals actually align? Are you the person that I thought you were growing up all of those years? Are we gonna invite Uncle Joe to Thanksgiving this year because what he has to say really rubs my, moral integrity the wrong way? And I think on a spiritual level, if we take politics out of it, if we take faith even out of it, if we come back to that sense of harmony and finding dignity in one another and really practicing, and we haven't gotten into a conversation today around like the skills and the how to do this, which I promise if you want to reach out to me afterwards, there's a plethora of opportunities for learning and diving deeper. But I think that sense of, moral value and foundation, we are able to build community externally to our family much easier and probably more effectively if we're being honest with ourselves and being able to turn back to those in our own households and ignore the labels that maybe we have even ascribed to them because of rifts, and been able to cultivate a sense of relationship, understanding, empathy, and compassion towards those. So spirituality at the family level. I also think as we are going along this journey of growing up and finding sense of self, a lot of us come into finding who we are and creating a name for ourselves when we're going off to school, if we're attending an institution of higher education. And so I think really putting effort into creating spaces on college campuses where students themselves are encouraged and expected to be able to have a higher sense of moral foundation and have conversations with people who come from different ideologies, of different frames of reference. And we don't need to couch it in spirituality. We don't need to couch it in politics. Again, it's just people coming together to share perspectives. And I think that there are so many great examples of organizations across the country doing that. Bridge USA is a phenomenal organization with chapters all across the country where students are leading other students to come together to build foundations of respect and understanding through conversation. Not that they're going to agree at the end of the day, because certainly we wouldn't have, the ideals of democracy are around disagreement, but it's healthy disagreement. It's how we disagree. And so these students coming together, and I think, hundreds and hundreds of college chapters and universities are instilling these ideals into the values of their students so that when they are adults and are practicing in positions of leadership, they have this on a almost spiritual level, the understanding that we are all of the same body, that we are all of the same blood even, that we need to be working cohesively together. And then on the faith example, the Baha'is have done a phenomenal job of creating spaces like this where we can have interfaith, religious convenings. Interfaith America is another great example. Potlucks, Pete, to your point, where people aren't coming together around a specific thing other than building community with each other. And those seated relationships there are what create the spiritual foundation of a community and of ourselves. So I think it's almost stepping outside of that faith-based lens to be able to bring people just back to the morals of who am I and where do I want to go and how do I create space for others in that vision.
Do I have time for 2 quick points, or?
Yes, you
Yeah.
do.
Really quickly.
Please. Thank you, Chris.
So at IFS, we recently did a survey of 24,000 parents across the country. They gave us 40,000 profiles of children within their households, and then we did a sample of 2,600 teenagers within those homes. And what we were trying to do was get a very detailed look at family practices around specifically screens, but also social life and play. And what we found was sad. Children at 3 years old, more than 50% of children at 3 years old are given internet-connected devices. By the age of 11, the iPhone is the dominant form of connection and the dominant screen form. But what that's also paired with is, unfortunately, is the more a family is prone toward screen-based childhood, the less the child has the opportunity to go out and play with friends. So by the age of 17, 60% of American kids are not allowed to leave their neighborhood without an adult supervisor. 60%. Now, there are situations where maybe that's an advisable thing, but if we're talking across the country, 60% is obviously kind of a devastating sign of the condition of social life, as Pete was describing. In our family life, my wife and I, we have decided to try and take the plunge and, not exactly be free range parents, but we allow our kids to go out and kind of walk the neighborhood, climb trees, get into a mess. And it's a great challenge because we're on our own really in that regard, where most other families are doing, I think, what they consider the more reliable thing, which is it is actually safer to have your kid on a screen at home where you know where they are. So if society works in the way that, kind of anything works, is if you trust it, it functions. And so you can't send your kids out if your society is dysfunctional. So anyway, that's not exactly a solution, but I would offer one further thing on the spirituality dimension. I'm going to push a little further on, rather than universal principles, into kind of actual spiritual practice. So one thing I would recommend is those of you who pray for your neighbor, pray for your enemy. And we tend to think of prayer as just merely a form of supplication where we're asking God to do something for us, but actually, it's the means by which we access God's mind on things. And so to be able to see somebody with the mind of God is to be able to see them comprehensively, and then therefore their value becomes revealed to us. And so I just want to take an opportunity on Capitol Hill to endorse prayer, because it doesn't come around very often. But I'm so grateful for the opportunity that to have this conversation, because it does, to me, it signals that perhaps we're moving toward something better, where we can talk about prayer on Capitol Hill, and I'm very excited for this. But yeah, pray for your enemy and for your neighbor. Yeah.
And for me.
Yeah.
I have some. Thank you very much, Michael. I love that, and here we are talking about prayer on Capitol Hill. So happy to be a part of that conversation. I've got some specific questions for y'all. Let's start with Pete. All right?
All right.
You ready?
Here we go. Okay.
You have a book dedicated. What is the book about again?
It's the case for commitment in an age of infinite browsing.
I love that.
So, long haul heroes, people who work at things for a long time.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And your documentary that you've mentioned, Join or Die. But they're both different kind of angles on the same problem, a society where people are reluctant to commit to projects, but also causes, to each other, to organizations. And one of the focuses of your documentary, Robert Putnam, the Bowling
Alone,
the
Yes.
famous author of Bowling Alone, he came up with this idea of social capital. And how it's essential to democratic health. What does Putnam's research tell us about what's actually at stake? And what have you learned through both projects that gives you hope? Young people, they talk about the hope deficit, and 60% of young people do not have hope that the political infrastructure can move forward and get along, or that there's going to be a better future. Have you found hope from Putnam's work and from these projects?
Yeah, I'll just start with the good news. Oh, spoiler, I am hopeful. But let's start with moving back to that kind of first question. What is
We got one guy praying, another guy hopeful. What is going on? This is Washington, D.C.
I know, we
people.
should be more cynical. They put us in the basement for a reason. Let's start with Putnam's research. I'm going to give you the most rapid-fire political science study I can give you. I'll see if I can do it in a minute, which is Putnam got into this work because he did one of the largest political science studies in Italy from 1970 to 1990. In 1970, Italy split up from being mostly a centralized government to having a bunch of regional governments. It's like if we didn't have states and suddenly we had states in 1970 for the first time ever. And he, as a political scientist, said, oh my gosh, this is the perfect political science experiment because I'm going to have the creation of like 20 governments, and then I can follow them for 20 years, see which governments succeed, which fail, and most importantly, why. And that'll teach everyone around the world what is the most significant factor in making a democracy succeed. So he did this study called the Making Democracy Work study. He followed them for 20 years. He was able to organize them from most effective government, Emilia-Romagna in the north, where Bolognese sauce was invented, to the least successful democracy, Basilicata or Calabria, where the mafia is very strong. And he was able to organize them. But the most important thing was not ranking the regions of Italy. It was what was the difference between Emilia-Romagnas of Italy and the Basilicatas and Calabrias of Italy. It turned out it wasn't the economy. It wasn't, unfortunately, it wasn't education. It wasn't the design of the government because they all had the same design. It wasn't a particular ideology because a bunch of the successful ones had different ideologies. What the most successful thing he found was that the regions that had the most thriving democracies had bocce clubs and choral societies and local newspapers and big plazas where people talked and a culture of hanging out on the street where you talked with your neighbors. It was the community organizations, but also just a general culture of social trust that led to democracy thriving. And it wasn't just democracy. And he brought all the studies back to America where he found that we were in decline, and all these correlations and causations hold up, which is, you have better public health outcomes when you have more community. COVID spread less in places with higher social trust. You have more economic growth. People are getting richer in places where this is happening. But you also have more economic justice and equality. More people are benefiting from that economic growth in places where there's better community. The schools do better in places where there's more community, even when they have less funding. The neighborhoods are safer even when they have less cops. Putnam always likes to say, knowing each other's first names, if you had to choose between 10% more cops or 10% neighbors knowing each other's first names in terms of what leads to safety, and this isn't a moral point, this shows up in the data, take 10% of neighbors knowing each other's first names all the time. And so you could go on and on. So this is very, very important to work on this. And so one of the things we've been trying to say that's been giving us hope is we've been trying to say we have mayors and governors and presidents working all the time on economic development. They are trying to proliferate beneficial economic activity. They are measuring. We have the Bureau of Labor Statistics that you all work with that take in economic measurements all the time and say that is the health of our country. We need a civic development movement in this country where we are trying to proliferate these community associations. And when you get up to the, most of that work's going to be done on the local level by mayors and neighborhoods. But when you get up to the congressional level, what you can start with, which Chris Murphy and Rokana and others have been working on, is how can we start measuring civic life and community life and start saying that that's the health of our country, because that correlates way more with better outcomes than just economics. Economics are important and they feed into this, but that's not it. And so here's what gives me hope. There is already on the ground a civic development movement in this country. There are people all over that are, we've helped with organizing 50 joining fairs across the country where, activities fairs shouldn't just be for people in college. They should be for everyone in a city. We've run into Tony Bacigalupo in Norwalk, Connecticut, where he started a civic directory and did a civic census where he simply just went around and tried to find everything that there was to do. And that inspired a Stuff to Do fair in Lancaster. There was also a Stuff to Do fair in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where let's just start gathering this information and distribute the information about what there is to do. In Sisters, Oregon, I'll give an Oregon one to end it.
What?
In Sisters, Oregon, there's a wonderful person who organized a community builders monthly meetup where he takes all the leaders of all the community groups and people who care about building community, and they meet up once a month and they talk about what civic infrastructure can we build to support each other in building community in Sisters, Oregon. You multiply that by every city, there's 3,500 or so counties in America. That is a civic revival in this country, and we've done it before. At the turn of the last century, that's when we got the public playground movement, when we got kindergarten, when we got the public high school, when we got the Rotary Club was invented, the NAACP was invented. We've done this before where we've turned this around, and we can do it again, but it's going to take work at all levels to do that. And I'll just end with this. Any Kentuckians in the audience? We got Kentuckians. You know about Wendell Berry? Wendell Berry's great poem, February 2nd, 1968, in the dark of the moon and flying snow, in the dead of winter, war spreading, families dying, the world in danger, I walk the rocky hillside sowing clover. I walk the rocky hillside sowing clover. We live on a rocky hillside right now, but there are people all over sowing clover, and that is not nothing, that is not a small thing, that is everything.
Beautifully said. Thanks, Pete. And in 1975, Dungeons and Dragons was invented.
Yes. A community organization.
Which is bringing communities together since that time.
Seriously, at every tour stop we've done, people come up to us and say, Dungeons and Dragons is what led me
Telling
to
you, it's you mentioned potlucks. I'm going to mention Dungeons and Dragons. You mentioned pickleball. There's 3 right there. Let's get this going. Carissa, hi. How you doing? All right, good. As a network and movement builder working at the intersection of civic engagement and bridging divides, you've seen up close what it takes to build relationships across differences and what doesn't work. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that. But what kind of conditions need to be in place for genuine trust to take root between people who see the world very differently? What conditions need to be in place? And how do you move from those individual relationships, talking to your Uncle Joe at Thanksgiving dinner, to something that scales to a movement or institution or a community?
Thanks, Rainn. The conditions that we try to help partners in the Listen First Coalition, which at this point is over 550 organizations working in different corners of the country, local, state, national levels, to do fundamentally what Rainn is describing, bring people together across difference, to build that trust, understanding, respect, to find common opportunities for creating solutions. So how do they do it, and what needs to be in place? Fundamentally, a few things. Curiosity. That, if you take nothing away from what I said, take away curiosity. We don't know what we don't know. We absolutely need to be curious about the world. And everybody's lived experience and perspective is what informs how they are showing up in the world. We also have to understand that we are in a situation where there is a huge perception gap. If you aren't familiar with the organization More in Common, look them up. Take their Hidden Tribes quiz. There's actually a new version coming out. It may already have launched. It will help you to see that what you think the other side thinks of you as, different from themselves is not actually what they think of you. Our belief of how we are viewed by others is so much more filled with animosity and hatred and a degrading sense of perspective that of course we're going to show up and not trust the other. Of course we're going to be on our defense and I don't know about talking to you, always thinking there's a hidden agenda. But really we're a lot closer to the other than we believe. And the where we could find common ground, if we could trust that we were going to be met with an ear of listening, possibly understanding, even a hint of empathy, those are the things that allow for trust to be built. But it has to start with curiosity. And in that curiosity, I would also encourage a dose of humility. I have to do it all the time. We just, again, don't know what we don't know. So showing up with that humble approach to be able to listen, to be understood, and give others the space to be understood, I am absolutely, and no one in our bridging movement would say that we expect agreement at the end. Common ground solutions are not necessarily agreement. And if we are holding true to the principles of our democratic process, we want to celebrate difference because that's the foundation of innovation. But we didn't get to where we are by having such vitriol. We need to be able to rein that component in and be able to be curious enough to find the opportunities for alignment. So I think at an individual level, like those are the principles that really allow us to just cultivate that sense of self and perspective to be able to build those bridges. And it scales. Once we can do that at the individual level, we feel empowered. There's a sense of self-efficacy that comes along with that says, okay, well, I did that and I really didn't think that person was going to respond well, but we're okay. Maybe I can bring this at a neighborhood level. Maybe I can bring this to my workplace. Maybe I can bring this to my kids' school where that other mom, oh my gosh, that other mom. Like we can start bringing these things into our everyday life, and it really does scale up. At the movement level, we have rifts all the time between these different organizations, but it's my job to help everybody come back to what our common endeavor is, our common purpose, and it is to find that moral foundation of dignity and humanity so that we can all thrive, so that we can build community in our community, but also community at the national level. So I'll pause there.
Beautiful. Well said. Thank you so much. I'm glad you mentioned humility. It's something I'm really good at. Michael, we'll get to you. Your work focuses on the relationship between the family and technology, with a focus on centering the moral and spiritual dimensions of that relationship. The family is the original school of trust. How do we make technology serve human flourishing rather than undermine it? I love the phrasing of that question. I didn't write it. How can individuals, families, and communities be assisted to make appropriate technological choices in light of shared values, standards, and goals?
Well, it's obviously a very big question, so I will try to just cut at the surface of it. What I would suggest is that the best use cases of technology will emerge if we are willing and able to stop the worst use cases of technology. And I also think just on a conceptual level, it's important for us to realize that the question of family well-being is not incidental to technological change, it's quintessential to it. Because the future itself is actually a product of the family. The family creates the next generation. The next generation is that which will make the future. And so if we consider family an afterthought to technological change, what it will end up having to be done is it will have to be fit as a square peg or a round peg, or a square peg into a round hole of technological change. Instead, what we need to do is realize that the well-being of family sits at the heart of technological change. And it's because the plausibility structures of life, to use a phrase by Peter Berger, plausibility structures are that which make the mores of a society plausible to you, are formed within the family. To have technology constantly attacking it and extracting from it, distracting it from itself, is to shake the plausibility structures and make them effectively implausible to the mind. So that's an incomplete answer. I'm happy to talk with people at greater length afterwards. But what I will say is we just need to realize that the family and technology are at a fundamental intersection with each other. And I'm glad that it's starting to dawn on people in general that this is the reality.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Jasmine, we'll end with you. Your work sits at the intersection of public health research and community building, two fields that increasingly point to the same finding, that social connection is not a nice-to-have thing, but a fundamental determinant of health and well-being. And what have you seen about what actually helps communities build or rebuild social trust, especially where it was damaged or maybe never strong in the first place? And what is the role that young people can play in the process of change in society? What can be done to encourage them to play this role?
I have no time. There's only 2 minutes left.
No,
so
it's okay. It's okay.
I'll try to
You have more
answer
time.
briefly, yes.
I'm captain of this ship. Don't listen to the people with the little signs. You know what? You can have 3 minutes.
All I've ever wanted. No, these are really good questions. I think, as you mentioned, part of my research, I look at how we've shaped society and how that impacts our health. Because a lot of times people think, oh, it's the individual, what they choose to do. And a lot of young people, that's what they think. It's like, I'm an individual. We live in a very individual society. And so all they think about is like, well, I have to do this thing and I just have to get ahead. And that's actually really stressful for them. Because naturally you don't feel like you're an individual. You feel like you're part of a family. You feel like you're part of a community. You don't understand why you're being forced to just think about yourself. And so I think part of working with young people is helping them to say, actually, no, you shouldn't feel you're not an individual, actually. You're part of something larger. Society, we shaped it a particular way and we can reshape it. And you have a particular role in reshaping it. Because the period of youth is significant. We all have experienced it, but it also goes away. And so you have to kind of grab it while you still can. And so I spent a lot of time with youth. I just spent 11 days at a seminar called the Institute for Studies in Global Prosperity with around 40 youth from the southeast region of the United States from 7:30 a.m. to 10 p.m. And we looked at certain ideas around how to contribute to social action, how to think about ways that your work is your worship, but also how to take charge of a future where you are, the sacred charge of your life is the younger generation as well. And these young people, they came in, I'm here, I'm going to study finance, I'm going to make a lot of money, and I'm going to probably not actually be happy, is what one of them said. He's like, I'm not going to be happy, but this is what society tells me I should be. By the end of it, they're like, maybe they'll still study finance, but I want to see how do I build an economic structure where it is just. How is it that I am actually able to spend time with my family in a way that we actually think about each other, where we're not fighting with each other, where we all actually have rights and responsibilities towards each other. We're not just individuals, we aren't just all on our screens, we actually are building these building blocks of a society. And it was a marvelous thing to see. And how do we just do that more and more and more? These young people want to do it. They're actually yearning for it. And I think sometimes people discount them. They say they can't. They won't give their time. But they love revolutions. They love changing things. They want to. So how do we provide them with the opportunity to do so? And whether that's pickleball or tennis, Dungeons and Dragons, which my 9-year-old loves to play now, or whatever it is, how do we give them that opportunity to do so? Because they want to channel their powers. Why they still, not that us older people can't, but it's just different. It's a unique time of life where they really can harness it. And so, again, I said this before, but how is it that those of us who have the experience and the desire to walk alongside them to help channel it can do so? And also, it is a matter of health. There's biological signatures that you can see when you don't structure society in a way where people can thrive, where they can channel their powers, where they are, if they're alone and isolated, you can see it in their DNA. And it's something that you can reverse, though, by taking practical steps that many of the panelists have mentioned.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I want to finish this panel by bringing our attention back to the closing words of the Declaration of Independence. Let's listen to them again under the context of what we've heard today. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And in some way, shape, or form, everyone here at this table is doing that work. It's great work. It's God's work. It's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and knowledge and for coming together. And thank you to the Baha'i Office of Public Affairs to bringing us together as well. Thank you so much. PJ?
Thank you to our wonderful panelists and to Rainn for being such a charming moderator. Thank you. It was a really beautiful conversation. Part of this process, as we mentioned at the beginning, was really encouraging conversation among ourselves. And so, as I mentioned at the beginning, we'll give you guys about 10 minutes to just kind of find people around you. And the 4 questions that are on the screen are also on your handout, the program that you received, if you turn it over to the back. And then, we'll ask the panelists to kind of hang out for a little bit. And we'd love to hear after 10 minutes just, what came out of your conversations and if it generated anything that you wanted to engage the panelists on further. We're going to try and do this in 10 minutes. I don't know if it's possible, but we'll give it a shot. And so we'll just give you guys, some time to find your neighbor. I know it's a little bit uncommon to come to a beautiful panel like this and then talk to people around you, but we're going to encourage you to try. And then we'll see if we have a few minutes at the end to share anything back with the panelists. Okay, I'm going to try and bring us back for just a very brief, maybe Q&A period. So, I think I'm just so energized by your energy having these conversations. And I'm so energized by the conversations of the panelists themselves. And we're really trying to learn about, in this day, in this project, sort of collapsing the distance between, everyone contributing and having like a group of really thoughtful people who have spent a lot of time thinking about this and really feel like we're having one conversation. So, I think we have a couple of mics here. And if there's any just highlights from your conversation or a question you want to ask one of the panelists, we'll take a couple minutes and try and end in like 5. Yeah, tonight.
Good morning. Thank you all for your insightful words and everything. I had the pleasure of speaking with one of the youths today, and we talked a lot about social media, actually, the second question. It kind of came up organically in that conversation and reflecting on that, and how sometimes social media provides a sense of faux connectivity, where we all think that we've connected on something and we all think that we've seen the same thing, and but in reality, it gives us a sense of, or like even social justice, like I posted, I'm angry about this, or I'm upset about this, but there's no actual physical or tangible movement behind that other than posting. So my question to the panel is, like, when we leave today, this has been a lovely conversation, what do we tangibly need to do when we leave here today to progress in this unified common endeavor?
I think anyone who feels moved to answer, please feel free.
A number of years ago, I lived in New York City for 20 years, and this was back in the iPod days. And I remember thinking, if I'm going around on the subway and thousands of people are passing me every day, and if I have these earphones in, if somebody ever wanted to talk to me, I wouldn't be available to him or her. And so I took them out, and I stopped wearing headphones around to make my ears available. How many people do you think wanted to talk to me on the subway in all those years that I had my... 0. But I was there for them. I was there. I would just encourage that we all start to do likewise. We should probably institute practices within our own lives where we say that today I'll take my earphones out, or I'll keep my phone at home for the next few hours. I'll go out without it. And make yourself available to other people, and try to meet them where they are, look them in the eye, just try to be present. And obviously that's very challenging, given the addictiveness of the devices. So do what Pete recommended, is do it with someone else. And I think, go out together with your phone at home, and I think you'll find the world opening up to you.
I think we have time for one more question. And then, maybe we'll hear the question and then have a couple responses.
So not so much a question, but just specifically on question 4, our conversations focus specifically on that idea of knowing someone's first name, and then what that means as far as the trust and curiosity and empathy piece, and that in each of our 3 contexts, where we were finding opportunities to kind of go out, either specifically in grassroots organizations and sort of leading that, or just going door to door and sort of meeting people and finding how quickly that ended up catalyzing kind of more community, and how quickly then that leads to be able to understand sort of the people around you and see them as part of community, which then leads to a sense of what do we need to be collectively better driving. And so kind of a few of the points that were sort of made during the course ended up being very germane and something that we were able to kind of find in our own experience.
Were you going to say something about the previous one too?
I'll just say if I could recommend a book to look into this, I'd recommend Martin Luther King's memoir of the Montgomery bus boycott. It's called Stride Toward Freedom, and read the first 2 chapters if you only want to read 1 or 2 chapters, but the whole thing's great. The reason you should read the first 2 chapters is they're very boring. And they're very boring because he spends the first 2 chapters listing off all the organizations in Montgomery, Alabama that he had to go to meetings for. There was his own church. Then there were subcommittees in the church: the social committee, the newsletter committee, the education committee, the religion committee, the chorus committee. Then he went to meet with a committee of all the pastors of all the different organizations. There was also a bricklayers union. There was also a women's political organization. There was also already a thing called the Human Rights Commission, which was doing racial justice in Montgomery. And there was an organization called the NAACP, of who the long-term 10-year executive secretary was Rosa Parks. And so when Rosa Parks sat down on that bus and sparked a year-long thing that kicked off that wave of the civil rights movement, that spark would have gone nowhere if people hadn't been gathering tinder in Montgomery, Alabama for 30 years, including her. I think her heroism is not sitting on the bus. That was very nice. But that grew out of, I think her heroism is the average Tuesday night in the middle of that 10-year period where she didn't want to go to a meeting and she decided to go to a meeting anyway. Ella Baker, the grandmother of the civil rights movement, I think this should be as important as the Declaration of Independence, this letter she wrote home in the 40s. Okay, so the 40s, not the 60s, fighting in the civil rights movement. She was working for the NAACP, she was organizing in the South, and she writes this letter back on a random Tuesday night, and she says, she ends the letter with, "I should go now. I have to go to one of those basement church meetings that I feel are not ever worth it, but in the end they are. And it's all about the spade work. So be it. It's all about the spade work. So be it." I think that should be etched in a monument. It's all about the spade work. So be it. That is what we do in Tuesday night meetings. And so what I would say is, what social media wants to give you is the big moment, the big brave moment where you have the spark. But our real heroes, the way to embody the change that we want, the change that's going to come in 20 years, is start gathering that tinder, and that tinder's gathered in Tuesday night meetings. So go to a Tuesday night meeting, and then go to it the next week, and the next week, and the next week.
I think we'll hear from Carissa and then close up.
Okay, so I have 3 things to say about what to do. So number 1, you're doing it. You showed up today to hear this conversation. You had enough curiosity and openness. So congratulate yourself for being part of the solution and continue showing up. So that's 1. 2, if you're ready to build those relationships with your neighbors, you can take a practice from my 6-year-old who saw somebody at the park that she really wanted to become friends with. And she said, "Mom, can we put notes on doors in our community?" We live in a condominium. To just let people know that we'd like to have park playdates. You don't necessarily have to put park playdate notes on your doors, but honestly, put a note on a neighbor's door and just introduce yourself and say, we've lived next to each other for some time. I'd love to get to know you, and see what happens. Put an email that's benign. Put a cell phone number. You'll be amazed at the responsiveness of people recognizing that you see them, you value them, and you want to have a conversation with them. The third thing, if none of those others feel right, check out conversation.us. You will find a ton of opportunities to get involved. You could have a conversation with somebody from different sides of the political aisle today, signing up through one small step. and be matched with somebody. You could take the Unified Challenge. You could watch a film, maybe even watch Join or Die. But there are so many opportunities on there that if you're not quite ready to take the local, and it feels a little bit more practical and safe to engage with someone that you might not see in the future, just explore those opportunities on there. And I'm happy if anybody wants to ever reach out, I can hook you up with opportunities.
And just a plug, of course, A Common Endeavor, part of its intention was to be able to encourage conversation. So we would love for you to take this document and bring it to whatever circles you're in and read it and study it in parts or in full and just see what comes out of the conversation. It's really just the same spirit that we have, the space that we created here this morning is embedded in this letter. So that's one other thing that you can do coming out of this to bring people together. And Rainn Wilson said it was great, so it's gotta be good. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to our panelists and to Rainn for being here and joining us for such a rich conversation. And we hope you have a wonderful day.